Good evening and welcome to Candidate Spotlight from Arlington Independent Media. I'm your host, Ted Billich. And with me today is one of the contenders for the Democratic primary for a seat on the County Board of Arlington County, Katie Cristol. Katie, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am wonderful. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was Columbia Pike. As we were talking about a little bit before, the Pike has been a very hot topic of conversation over the last 6 to 8 months. Do you think that something went wrong during the Columbia Pike streetcar project, and if so, what?
Good question. And it's the hot one, right? I get that not only in my own neighborhood, but knocking on doors all around the community. I love the Pike. The Pike is my home. My husband and I own a townhouse just off the Pike on Barton Street, as I was just telling you. And so we feel very vested in this conversation about the future of the Pike. I think it's worth noting and worth paying respect to just how many years of planning got us to the debate that we had last year. There are a number of my neighbors and others from all parts of the community actually who really participated in a long process to develop a vision for the Pike. It's a vision of the Pike that I am bought into, that shows the Pike or places the Pike in a place of robust growth that preserves the sort of quirkiness and livability of what's often called Arlington's Main Street. And it's something that I admire and believe we should go forward with. We know that the center of that plan doesn't hold without a transportation strategy. And so I really value and would want to push for aggressive action on what's next. I think in the immediate, we do have some good strategies that we had to come up with as part of the Plan B for the Pike to enhance bus service and make sure that buses are moving more dynamically down the Pike. You get that sort of sense of real transit-oriented development when people know that transportation is reliable and safe and they don't have to mark themselves to a timetable to really get out their door and get where they need to go. So it's a vision for the Pike, like I said, that I am really bought into, something I want to push for aggressively in our post-streetcar days. I have tried to some extent to sort of stay out of the post-mortem of the streetcar. I think it is important to do, it's important to be aware of. But one of the things that motivated me to run was that I think we've got to move on. And we need people on the county board who are really invested in what's next and not about, whoever's side may have gone into the issue to get us here.
I totally agree about the idea of not going into a post-mortem. What lessons can be applied going forward in terms of public policy and decision-making for the next time we confront an issue like a streetcar for an important part of the county? Absolutely.
I think that's an important place to be focusing, right? What did we learn? One of my big takeaways from having conversations with folks all over the county about the streetcar is that I actually don't think that we ended up disagreeing with one another because our values were that dissimilar. I think there were challenges with communicating what the streetcar was designed to do. I'll give you an example. I'm a longtime volunteer at Randolph and I've had a few conversations with one of the teachers there. She lives in North Arlington, but she really wants to make sure that the Pike stays affordable because she cares a lot about those kiddos at Randolph Elementary and their family's ability to stay in the county. She was worried that the streetcar would be bad for housing affordability. I know because I spent a lot of time talking with the architects of that plan that it was actually designed to get us to more affordability and protect affordability, as you know, right, because we had this idea that a more desirable main street attracts an appetite for density among the developers. The developers then come to the county to grant that density instead of doing the by right development. We protect affordable housing. I've already lost that elementary school teacher at Randolph by the time I get into that level of kind of wonkiness, frankly. Yeah. And so I think being able to communicate our vision for Arlington in a way that appeals to the values that we all, I believe, still do share about affordability and the diversity that affordability achieves really is important and an important takeaway as we go forward and continue to have these conversations about investments in the community.
And you said we should be looking forward. What should be done in the near term, and then what should be done out 2, 3, 5 years from now to make Columbia Pike a better place to live, work, and play?
Yeah. Well, so I mentioned the enhanced bus service, and that really is where I'm focused. The county has continued to move forward on the multimodal project for the Pike, which is designed to make the Pike a little more walkable, a little more bikeable, because it's not particularly bikeable right now, and sort of create some of that sense of multimodality, which is a sort of complicated word that really just means, that feel that you get when people are out and about in the streets and have options to get where they're going. So I think that's, one of our strategies in the immediate. As I mentioned, I'd like to see us moving forward on the expanded bus service, or excuse me, the enhanced bus service. And we have got some plans. The county is now taking before the community some plans for these bus stops, which will allow us to do off-vehicle fare collection, which again really makes sure that when buses move down the Pike, they do so seamlessly. With the flow of traffic, it is a way of tackling some of that congestion. And really taken together, I think, in the near term, in the immediate and the 3 to 5 year timeline, we are talking about focusing on moving people and moving people more efficiently up and down the Pike for work and for play. And in the long term, I have been asked, and I'm hearing people start to ask about whether it might be time to begin the conversation about Metro on Columbia Pike. I don't think that's our strategy for 2020, right? There are a lot of reasons that doesn't work in the immediate. But the Orange Line started with a 1955 survey about transportation needs for the community. And now it's become the anchor of our urban villages along the Roslyn to Ballston corridor. And so I think simply being amenable to big ideas and demonstrating that, even as our economic climate changes, that we understand that it was big ideas and commitment to transit-oriented development that has made Arlington so strong might be the future of Columbia Pike as well.
Another big idea, at least it was a couple of years ago, Artisphere.
Yeah.
Were you a supporter of the Artisphere project when it was first adopted?
One of the concerns I've had about the Artisphere all along is that it wasn't clear what problem or opportunity we were solving for the Artisphere. It was sort of designed to bring arts to that community, and then it kind of became designed to serve the business interests of that community, and then it became a way to create a sense of place in Roslyn. And it sort of, I think, all along really was trying to be all things to all people. One of the things that I note about Artisphere, and I actually think makes Artisphere fairly representative of some of our spending priorities in the county, is that arts groups, I mentioned earlier, my husband and I have been part of the Arlington Players, who you might imagine would be natural allies for arts expenditures in the community, haven't always been the biggest champions for Artisphere, because they would rather see the county partner with them. They're already bringing the arts and livability to Arlington, and when they go to the county for partnerships, converting a small county-owned property into an in-kind rehearsal space, for example, they're being rebuffed or they're not being engaged. And so when they see the county making a big expenditure like Artisphere, ostensibly for the arts, it actually kind of raises their hackles. And I think we've done that a few times, with parks, with Artisphere, and I think we need to maybe just start being a little more strategic about leveraging the talent and the community groups and the neighborhood associations that we have here instead of making big expenditures.
So when you have a diverse group of people like the arts community, how do you identify what the voice really is of that community in order to set priorities for it? Do you need big place markers like Artisphere in order to coalesce funding, or can you coalesce the funding without a specific identifiable target?
That's a great question. It's a great question, and I think what you're asking is something sort of about a way of thinking, right? I suppose you might imagine a kind of pendulum, right, where on the one hand it is solely relying on community groups to provide in a very one-off basis, having sort of scattershot approaches to livability in the arts. I might argue, though, actually we've swung too far in the other direction, which is the county designing and deciding what those groups need instead of letting it come out of a community process. And I suspect the ideal balance is somewhere in between. I think, for example, do you know about Reevesland Community Center?
No.
So Reevesland was the last working dairy farm in Arlington. And when the family passed away, the sort of family patriarch passed away, his kids sold the farmhouse to Arlington County. The property surrounding it, the farm, the community surrounding Reevesland has sort of rehabilitated it. They've turned it into this great sort of demo farm where kids from the surrounding elementary schools get to come and play and experience animals. And they have been working on the county for years in trying to get the farmhouse, which the county now owns, rehabilitated. I think the county's owned it since 2001. And because we can't finance or come up with the sort of Cadillac version for Reevesland Farmhouse as, this farm of the future. We have just left it dormant. And I give that example because you have a community that really has coalesced, to your point, around it. They have, rallied, I think, the 7 surrounding civic associations. They send hundreds of letters to the county board every budget process, and they cannot seem to get attention or get traction from the county to make what would be a relatively modest investment compared to Artisphere and this livability project. And so I think listening to, when our community does organize itself around an issue and an opportunity, listening to them and being responsive to what they need instead of setting a strategy for what we think the community needs.
What do you think, Katie, your role would be as a county board member in order to facilitate that sort of process? How would you do things differently than either the incumbent county board members or any of the others who are vying for a seat on the county board is talking about?
Yeah. This gets to the heart of why I'm running, which is that I think we have got to be bringing more voices to the table in Arlington. I think our current system of governance, we have so many mechanisms for civic engagement, and we are always engaging the same citizens. And there really is this culture of they don't come to our meetings, and so we don't hear their voices. And I think that's wrong, and I think that shouldn't be acceptable anymore. Specifically, a few of the things I've talked about, right, is taking a look at our entire system of community engagement, drilling down with the folks who do know how to engage renters and do know how to engage young people, the Bravo Tenants Association, for example. Talking with them about what the obstacles are to a renter or a new American or a young family, or frankly women sometimes participating in our civic engagement processes and fixing them, right? I serve on the Commission on the Status of Women, and one of the things that's been challenging to us as a relatively diverse and relatively young commission is some of the laws that I think originate in Richmond about our inability to hold a meeting virtually or to do any of our business over the phone. That sort of attitude excludes lots and lots of people who would love to participate and give their feedback and shape the direction of the community by serving on a commission or a work group, but can't give up their 7 to 10 o'clock hour every Monday night, for example. So that's a little bit weedy, but altogether it's sort of this sense of what are the obstacles to community engagement? Let's get a whatever it takes mentality towards fixing them. And then let's use the lever of the county board process to say, if you're going to have a work group to study, for example, school facilities, you need to have a young family on there to give the perspective of when these young families are going to start having children and what that might mean for our school process. Or if you're going to have a site plan review process, you need to have a renter on that process who's potentially displaced, if that might be the case in that particular site plan. And bringing more voices to the table and really being, I think everyone is sincere in wanting there to be more civic participation, but willing to change our structure so that they really do foster participation, and making it the business of the county board to ensure that they are is a high priority for me.
I've heard sitting commission members question out loud why they exist. Would you be willing to put on the chopping block the whole commission structure, if necessary, to reshape the way that we do citizen engagement here?
I will always be for big ideas and stepping back and looking at things holistically. That's part of the case that I'm making for why we need, a younger voice, for example, on the county board. I think Arlington works really well in a lot of ways, and I don't think that we should be quick to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But if we, in doing that review of the commission process, find that it is inherently an exclusionary process that is always going to make it hard, and there is a better way, and there are models of other communities we can learn from that are doing it better, I am open to some rethinking. We have some commissions, I think, that are mandated by the state, for example, the Planning Commission, and we'd have to proceed carefully, but absolutely. I mean, I think thinking big, really being honest with ourselves about where the barriers are to engaging all of Arlington. Because until we start engaging more voices, the plans we come up with are always going to be supported by a pretty fragile consensus.
Now, I know you are on the Commission on the Status of Women. How does the status of women compare in Arlington to other regional powerhouses like Montgomery County and Fairfax County?
So I led as the author of a paper on this very subject that we submitted to the county board just a few months ago and are hoping to publicize more widely, asking that exact question. And we asked it in a number of different areas, for example, safety and sexual assault, childcare, homelessness and poverty and how those affect women, and the issue of women's representation in business. And our overall takeaway is that, unsurprisingly, Arlington does pretty well. We have a lot of advantages. We have a government that has been cognizant and cares about women and families. We have the resources to spend on, for example, tackling homelessness in really innovative ways. We are not all the way there. And one of the things that has worried us on the commission, and it's been a strong point of advocacy for me, is our response to sexual assault in the community. DC, for example, because you asked how we compare to other municipalities, I think is a model that we could be learning a lot from. They have a rape crisis center there. It's what's called a community-based response. Right now, we have a decent response, a pretty good response actually, if you decide to prosecute or come in through the law enforcement side. We have the victim witness program in the prosecutor's office, and it is staffed by some folks who really are compassionate and can help link survivors of sexual violence to the services they need. But if you choose not to get involved with law enforcement, and we know that many survivors don't, the process is very patchworky. It's very easy to kind of fall through the cracks. There's nowhere, for example, in Arlington to get a rape kit done or have that evidence collected. You have to get to Fairfax. The county right now, and the county's leadership right now, will tell you that it's because we have a regional response. I think that's probably fair from a policy design perspective. What we on the Commission on the Status of Women have been saying from the perspective of a survivor who is very overwhelmed and in one of her darkest moments, or his darkest moments, a regional strategy means getting to a non-metro accessible hospital in Fairfax, and it's just not working. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a little bit exemplary of a series of issues where the intentions are there, but we really do need to be sure that when we design policies, they are serving the community as we intend them, and being smart about outcomes-based ways of doing business here in the county, and I think that especially matters for women's issues.
One of the things that I hear as a business person in Arlington County is that the county is not friendly to business. How would you respond to the critic who says that, and what specifically, if anything, should be done to make it more business friendly?
I do think it's a fair critique. I think it's a long-standing one. For a long time, because of the imprint of the federal government, and because, purely because of the desirability of Arlington, right? We've been allowed to be pretty picky, and I think that's a good thing, right? You really get a high caliber of business that comes to Arlington, that wants to engage with the community, that's willing to go through our processes, and I think those processes are cumbersome, again, with the best of intentions, right? We really do want the community to be involved in, a new development in their neighborhood. But I think it's true that there are times when there is simply a thicket of red tape and processes that aren't serving Arlington's interest. One of the other gentlemen in the race was just saying this morning, and I agree completely with him, that it shouldn't take 2 years for the Italian store to open in Westover, right? One of the things that I think is promising and indicates to me that the county staff side has begun to realize this is an issue is the hiring of the new business ombudsman, or relatively new. In my conversations with the leadership of the Chamber of Commerce, it sounds like a lot of folks in Arlington, a lot of business interests in Arlington, really have found Shannon Flanagan Watson to be a great ally. And I think it's a way of looking at things, right? Having somebody on the staff side whose job it is to get you to yes is a powerful signal, and I think says something powerful about how we want to be more business friendly in Arlington. So that's something I'd like to see us continue forward with.
Arlington has been able to sit very comfortably for a number of years with the Silver Line going through, with the sorts of economic incentives that are being offered by some of our, I don't like to use it, but competitor jurisdictions. Mm. There is a sense of urgency. What if at all should be done to incentivize business formation and business settlement here in Arlington?
So I've worked for small businesses since I was 15, which I know I look like I'm about 25, but I promise that is over a decade ago. And I have sort of taken away that government does a couple of things that make a hospitable climate for business or make itself attractive to business. And there are some things that we can do, and there's some places where we get out of the way, frankly. And so I think what we were just saying, right, making it an easier place to do business falls squarely in the getting out of the way camp. And I think being able to change our reputation of Arlington as a place where it's easy to do business, where it's straightforward to set up shop, really will go a long way. In terms of where we can invest to attract, I think what's nice about those areas is that they tend to align with what makes us attractive and sustainable as a community in general. So there was a great quote in the Washington Post recently from a developer who talked about or an economic developer who said that millennials are the gold standard of economic development, and if you can attract millennials to your jurisdiction, the long-term economic health of your community is virtually guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So without overstating the case, he did it for me, right? But making this the kind of community that continue to be the kind of community, because we've done this well, where young adults, young professionals, and young families can come to Arlington, can afford to rent here, and then eventually afford to buy here, makes us really attractive to business interests.
Now, politics is all about trying to decide among competing priorities, and we saw some of that in the latest budget cycle. Is there any place that we should be spending less money right now in the Arlington County budget?
I think that the current budget does reflect reflects some discipline, I think is how I would say it, on the part of the current board and on the part of the current staff. We've sort of restrained the growth, obviously, of the tax rate, and I think that is exactly the right thing to do. I think given economic climates, given our sort of challenge of our shifting identity about where our commercial base will be as the federal government perhaps shrinks its footprint, given the fact that many of our citizens work for the federal government and are feeling their own pocketbook tighten, I think the era of increased government and more spending for now is not the right way to go, and I think our current budget reflects that. In terms of places to sort of cut or shrink in the long term, one of the dynamics I've observed from talking to a lot of people on the staff side, former leadership, and just citizens, is that it does seem a little bit like our response over the past couple decades to every challenge and to every opportunity has been to hire more. And this gets back to what we were talking about, sort of having the big vision for the community. I think there is a lot of untapped talent. The sweat equity of the folks who want to rebuild Reeveland, or the hours that the Arlington players would like to spend rehabilitating a community site. And I would like to see us think a little more about how we are engaging the talents and hours and time of our community members instead of always looking to grow our county staff. I'm still a Democrat. I'm not talking about massive layoffs or anything like that. But as we have retirements, it might be sort of an opportunity to look at sort of right-sizing county government for the long run.
Katie, you have a number of competitors. Why should someone vote for you as one of those people who's up for the county board instead of one of your competitors?
Absolutely. With our system of government in Arlington, this 5-member board, we have an opportunity to build a team. And I think we really benefit when that team includes the voices of all of Arlington. I have been making the case to folks that I represent Arlington's under 35 majority, but I am not running just to be the candidate of the Arlington's under 35 majority. I think we have common cause between seniors, for example, and young families on things like housing affordability. And I think having different ways of looking at those challenges really does help us innovate and help us be more forward-looking and rise to the challenges that we will have ahead. And so the chance to bring in new voices, the focus, the unrelenting focus that I will have not only on being a new voice, but bringing more voices to the fold of our governance process, like I talked about, I think is a differentiator. It's something that I represent that is new, and I think is good. It's good for all of Arlington to have a government that looks like all of Arlington. If you could aspire to look back on your career and say that my career was very similar to this person, looking back 60 or 70 years from now, who would you want to have as the person that you modeled your career on? That's a fantastic question. Around the time that I was in college, there was a sort of rising star in the Democratic Party, and an Arlington native, Emily Quirk, sister to Katie Quirk, and she was a representative in the state house from Charlottesville, which is where I went to school at UVA. And her legacy, she tragically died really young of cancer, and her legacy has always been one to which I aspire in my own career, in policy or in politics. She had a reputation for, through sheer congeniality, just being able to make tremendous strides and inroads and form personal relationships with people, even with whom she disagreed. It was sort of widely speculated that she might have been Virginia's first female governor, and I think, from what I understand of her legacy, that really was because of the ability she had to make people feel heard, even when she didn't agree with them. That has always been something that has meant a lot to me as I think about my own career. And if I live a long and full life and have people talk about my career in even half the same terms as they talk about hers, it really would be an honor.
Katie Cristol, it's been a wonderful time having the opportunity to talk with you about your candidacy for a county board seat. Best of luck in the primary. And thank you very much for joining Candidate Spotlight, a production of Arlington Independent Media. I'm Ted Village.